All right, well, welcome everyone to the next presentation in our Working Tools seminar series. My name is Andrew Martindale, and I'm here to extend a warm welcome to you on behalf of my co-organizers, Eric Simons and Allison Wiley, of our series, Community-Facing Data Management Platforms for Indigenous University Partnerships. And I'll remind you that if you've missed any of our previous talks, they're all available on our website. Please be in touch with me. I'll drop the URL in the link in the chats, but if you can't find it, just send me a note. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that UBC Vancouver is located on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Musqueam people. This land it's situated on has always been a place of learning for the Musqueam, who for millennia have passed on their culture, history, and traditions from one generation to the next on this site. And I know many of us are on unceded Indigenous territories across the various places in the world, and we can pause to think of our role as guests and the debt that we owe these communities. I'd also like to acknowledge the support of the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council of Canada and UBC's Green College for helping us organize this series. A reminder, just please keep your microphones and video feeds turned off. We do have some bandwidth issues today, so it's useful to keep those turned down. If you do have a question or a comment during the presentation or afterwards when we have the opportunity for questions, please add it to the chat. Or just let us know that you'd like to ask your questions. Eric Simons will compile these, as always, thanks Eric, for the discussion after the presentation. So it's with great pleasure that I introduce Jennifer Carpenter, Dana Lipovsky, Mark Wunsch, and Keiki Tasu, who is not here yet, but he's joining us in a few, hopefully in shortly, part of the team involved in the award-winning Huyat interactive website. And if you've had a chance to explore this extraordinary web space, you will have an appreciation for the care and the effort that went into its development. It is an immersive experience that foregrounds Celtic people's scholarship of their history, culture, and territory. It is, as they note in their abstract, a living archive that expands the concept of an archive in this very important direction. Jennifer Carpenter is the Culture and Heritage Manager of Celtic Integrated Resource Management and the Department, and the Director of the Celtic Cultural Education Center. Dana Lipovsky is a professor of archaeology at Simon Fraser University and a leading figure in community-based research practice, well known in the archaeological community for many of her initiatives, including her work on clam gardens and other forms of Indigenous resource management. Mark Wunsch is a principal at Green Coast Media, an innovative multimedia company, and Keiki Tasu, when he joins us, also known as Elroy White, is the owner of Central Coast Archaeology. You remember Elroy as the first presenter in our series. Their paper today is titled Voices on the Land, the Huyat interactive website. Please join me in welcoming Dana, Jennifer, Mark, and Keiki Tasu. You guys can take it away now.
Okay, thank you. And can folks hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, there's going to be a bit of delay. I'm talking to you via satellite from a fairly remote Gulf island, so I'll try to talk and leave pauses. I first just want to start with a disclaimer, which in public performance you should never do, but I have to tell you that I'm talking to you through a US election haze, that I haven't slept well in the past 3 days, and maybe some of you will join me in that haze space. But I'm really grateful to be here, and I want to thank the organizers, Eric and Allison and Andrew and other people. It's been a spectacular series, and I'm very honored to be part of it. I also want to thank you, Andrew, for your acknowledgement of being on Coast Salish territory, and it's really apropos to be doing these kind of acknowledgements and really think about what they mean in this context and all contexts, and particularly, of course, in the context of this project, which is all about people and place and connection to place, and about sharing and educating what that really means for culture and for the planet. So we're gonna talk about maybe should I turn off my video too, maybe you guys? Is that better? We're going to be talking about our 8-year-long collaborative project that culminated in this website that you're seeing now, but it's built on decades and decades of Celtic-driven work before this. So this is just really one endpoint of many, and Jenny will tell you a little bit more about that. Oh, Mark, I guess, can you start the slides, Mark, and share your screen?
Yeah, I'm just trying to do that. Can I do that from here? Is it working?
Not yet.
The mouse disappears as soon as you start the presentation for funny reason. Let me see. Maybe do this first here. Okay. How's this? Not good.
Looking great.
Can you see it?
Great. Yes, we can. You can go to the next slide if you would, Mark. Wonderful. So I'm just going to give you a really brief introduction to the project now, and then we're going to cycle through all the different presenters, and we'll come back to me in a little bit. But just to orient you, we're talking about one particular place on the Heiltsic cultural landscape called Huyat. It's actually a collective term for several socially and geographically connected bays on Northern Hunter Island. And here, this is actually a map from the website, but you can see the village of Bella Bella, where many Heiltsic people live today. And Huyat is about 30-minute drive by boat south of Bella Bella. Next slide, Mark. So what's really important to know is that though you get myself and Jennifer and Mark and Elroy today, that this is really truly the most collaborative project I've ever worked on. Many voices, many people's actions go into this project. And I'm just highlighting a few of them here. I've bolded the people who you're going to talk to today, but there are many others who really were involved from all stages. And I want to just call out Robin Humchit, who works or worked with Jennifer in the Heiltsic Cultural and Education Center. William Housty, whose family traditions connect him to this place, and also he works at Hermd and is an incredible knowledge holder. My former PhD student, Julia Jackley, who's did a lot of the ethno-archaeological work in Huyat. My mentor and dear friend, Nancy Turner, whose birthday is tomorrow, so we can all collectively wish Nancy a happy birthday. Josh Vickers, who worked with Julia throughout, and really, obviously, the Heiltsic leadership who were driving this from the get-go, and the Heiltsic community who were amazing to a person in their contributions. Next. So today, do you hit next, Mark? I can't, is there a delay maybe?
Yeah, there's a delay.
Okay. So I'm just going to give a really brief introduction to Heiltsic traditional territory and governance. It should be Elroy giving this or Jennifer, but just in terms of the way that things worked out, this is how it's going to happen. Then Jenny's going to talk about the history of the project and her perspective. I'm going to give a little deeper dive into the project details. Mark will share some website snippets, and then we'll end with Elroy talking about why this project really matters. Next slide, please. So just a little bit of more of an orientation. This is kind of a map that shows you Heiltsic traditional territory on the Central Coast. And it's a big area. It's 35,000 square kilometers. It covers quite a large kind of geographic and ecological extent. You can see these really deep inlets and kind of crenulated coastline. And I just put a picture here from our friend Kathy and Frank Brown's house when we were there for dinner one night. This is from the town of Bella Bella, and just gives you an idea of the landscape and what this looks like. Next slide. So the Heiltsic governance system is obviously quite complex and age old. And for those of you who know the archaeology of this region, you know that the Some of the earliest archaeological sites in the coast are located in Heiltsuk territory, the most famous being Tricket Island, which is 14,000 years of continuous occupation. And the Heiltsuk believe that they need to tend the land and take care of the land, and have done so through their hereditary chiefs since the beginning of time. And it is the hereditary chief's responsibility to hold up what they call gvilas, and Elroy and Jennifer can talk to you more about that, but these are essentially the traditional laws that uphold people's connection to place and to each other. So today, the Heiltsuk governing body is comprised of the elected chief, and that's Marilyn Slett, who you see over there in this picture, and the Himas, or the hereditary chiefs, and they work together to govern Heiltsuk territory. And there's many, many, many initiatives that the Heiltsuk are involved in. Boy, you couldn't even begin to list them all. And if you go to the next slide, just want to point out one of them, and that is the Heiltsuk Integrated Resource Management Department, HERMD. And that was started initially with funds with the Great Bear Rainforest agreements in the Central Coast. And Frank Brown, in his wisdom, when they wanted to give him a department of one person, he said, no, we need a department of like 8 people, and we need to cover fisheries and terrestrial issues like forestry, and we need to cover cultural issues, and so on and so on. So HERMD is really pretty unique on the coast, I would say, in terms of having all these really intelligent people in one place working toward an integrated resource management scheme. And really with, again, gvilas, these traditional laws, guiding the principles that are put forward in the countless initiatives that HERMD directs under the Heiltsuk Tribal Council. And our project was just one of them. Next slide. And I just wanted to end my little intro blurb with 2 of the kind of current cultural initiatives that many of you will know about that happened in Heiltsuk land. Tribal Journeys, Guatwas, in 2014. Tribal Journeys actually began in Bella Bella 30 years ago. And there was a really wonderful reunion of thousands and thousands of people in Bella Bella to do the Tribal Journeys again. And then the building of the big house, which opened in October 2019. And it was a long time since the Heiltsuk had a big house where they could carry on their very, very alive potlatching system. And Elroy can talk more about that because he's very involved in the potlatch world. And it's just really something extraordinarily special that this building now exists as a space where this can happen. So I will turn it over at this point to my dear friend and mentor, Jennifer Carpenter, and Jenny will tell you a little kind of more details about this project and how it came to be long before I entered the scene. And you can go to the next slide, Mark.
Turn my mic on. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Dana. Thank you, Andrew. And I'm honored to be able to speak over the cyberspace to the unceded territories of the Musqueam. Okay, I wanted to start off with an introduction to the Heiltsuk Cultural Education Center. Can you hear me okay? Anyways, it's an integrated, multidisciplinary undertaking that reflects and honors a great many diverse initiatives that our council started. I just wanted to give a brief introduction to that, because institution building is really important part of reclaiming your self-determination and sovereignty in your territory. In 1970s, council started a lot of separate initiatives, which are represented in the collections of the Cultural Education Center. They sent word out that they'd welcome a linguist to come to help develop a writing system and dictionary and grammatical descriptions so we can bring back our language. They initiated a taping project with funding from the first, what are they? Oh, I just forgot the name. For Citizens Fund, sorry, in which elders came together and identified what they wanted to talk about, that they thought was important to honor and to pass on to younger generations. And with funding from First Citizens Fund, Celtic speakers were lined up to ask the questions, the leading questions, and recording equipment was bought, and the answers were given in Celtic. The first project I worked on for them, well, was actually the Bella Bella Stories project in 1969. And I want to quickly recognize my mentors and teachers at UBC. I was in the master's program in anthropology. Wilson Duff was my mentor, and others on my committee were late Marge Halpin and Ken Burridge. And it was from Wilson Duff that I ended up in Bella Bella the summer of '68 on a project started by Kitty Carpenter, who'd married into the community, to record stories in English from the elders so that the kids could read their own stories in school and not Dick and Jane on the farm. Anyways, that was my first introduction to Bella Bella, and then I came back to work for them on the museum research project. We rode away to museums. They invited us to come to take pictures and collect documentations. And that was another First Citizens Fund project. Pardon? Someone say something?
I think we just had a microphone turn on briefly, Jennifer. I think it's turned off now.
Oh, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you just fine.
Okay. The same summer, Robert Hall and I were traveling around to 18 museums and identifying 650 pieces that came from Bella Bella. We brought back 2,000 photographs, black and white, multiple views for artists to study, and then color to see the color and some of the fine details of the carving. Because council wanted our artists to study our own styles and bring them back. So at that same summer, they had two of our health students, I think they were summer students, writing away to libraries and archives to gather any information that's published or photographs or whatever. And in 1980, the band did a general development plan with broad-based community input and identified goals and objectives. And that was when the current program description and titles were articulated. So that's what you see in this circle here. Next slide, please. So that when I met up with Dana and Nancy, a table was already set in terms of extensive information that had been recorded about this very important area south of the community. And Dana and Nancy came up with a title for a project, the Hunter Island Project, titled In the Shadow of Mansgamadli, which is the name of the biggest mountain you see there down in the distance. And the subtitle was From Mountaintop to Ocean Floor. And the time it was to be a study of the unique ecocultural history of Hunter Island to inform a vision for its future. Next slide. So that was started in 2012. It was a collaborative project between Celtic Nation researchers and those from UVic and other academic institutions. Dana joined later with all the wonderful people she brought to the project to work with us. We wanted to reflect the integration of Indigenous knowledge and perspectives with the tools of Western science. It was a multi-year integrated research project and involved many different types of studies. So that's how the project started. And I want to acknowledge it couldn't have started, although we had a lot of information about this area, without the enthusiasm and expertise that Dana and Nancy Turner brought. Already friends in the community. Next slide, please. So very briefly, I wanted to mention the source of knowledge and inspiration. This is a picture of my late husband, Cyril Carpenter, in his element, out on the water. I think he was taking someone from the Royal BC Museum around to visit our various burial sites, because she had, following through on a project Phil Hobler at SFU had proposed, which is stabilizing them and our wooden features. Anyways, he spent a lot of time at Huyat when they were smoking salmon with his great-grandmother and grandmothers. And he always talked about how the fish traps were used to selectively harvest salmon. He said that people could control which ones, the good breeders that went up the stream to breed, and they'd harvest the smaller ones for human use. And so this was a great source of inspiration when we had a researcher who was studying how was it carbon-16 gets up into trees, the nitrogen, with bears and wolves as vectors. Cheryl tried to raise how human beings dug fish guts and other things under berry bushes and so forth. And there wasn't an aha moment with that researcher, so we developed a project protocol that required that any natural science research incorporate Celtic traditional ecological knowledge and recognize that humans in our area are part of the environment, part of the landscape. Cyril was a commercial fisherman, is on council, and was acknowledged as a great people by many young people. Okay, next slide. One of our early projects was the Historic Sites and Place Name Project. It involved meeting with elders in the cultural center with published maps, in the late fall, dead of winter, and also field trips. This is the same boat that took us up Deer Pass and to Roscoe Inlet. In the foreground is Beatrice Brown. Behind her is Hannah Hall. And behind him, I think his name is Ross DeVoe. He was working on getting the wharf built at the time. They were a wonderful group, and they were so happy to be back out on the land. It was amazing how they remembered. They had a map of places and place names in their head. Next slide. This is John Rath, the linguist that we invited into our community. He came in the 1970s as a PhD student at Leiden University. He stayed in our community for 10 years and still is helping us with our language. He is interviewing Angus Campbell, a good friend of William Freeman and Heisla. Both of them were very passionate about being the ones to help record our dictionary and our language to bring it back. William Freeman wrote a letter to our chief counselor, Cecil Reed, in 1973, saying that Boas got it wrong. We're not Kwakiutl, we're Heiltsuk, and he'll do whatever little bit he can to help save our language, because losing it is nothing short of cutting our own throats. Anyways, John Rath continued developing extensive word lists and understanding the grammar with late Angus Campbell, who was one of our hereditary chiefs and knowledge holders. And so he developed the writing system, which we find extraordinarily useful in transcribing place names. You can float in the next part of this slide. And he also double-checked all the spellings of the names and gained an understanding of what the subtleties of the Heiltsuk language. It fascinated him. Here's an example of how the language is tonal. Two different things. The word for small muscles is quas, high tone, and for to sit on the ground is quas, low tone. So just a sample of the writing system he developed. So that's basically my presentation. We've had a long and productive and dynamic relationship with Simon Fraser University. I wanted to mention that. When they did the Namu dig and inventory field work, which hadn't been really done in the Central Coast by then, our council organized, get someone to call our elders together to say where our village sites were in other places. They assisted Tony Pomeroy in his PhD thesis, Health Settlement and Subsistence. They invited Helsick to participate in the Namu dig. When Simon Fraser, and there's a number of other field schools that our young people participated in side by side with university students. And when Simon Fraser wanted to do a second excavation at Namu, they met with council, and council wanted a formal agreement, a memorandum of understanding. And in that, we're able to negotiate that Simon Fraser Department of Archaeology would recognize oral traditions as a valid part of scientific inquiry. They're not just window dressing to a little local flavor to what archaeologists try to understand and talk about. It's interesting because Roy was a wonderful person, ran great field schools, but he didn't really understand what the oral tradition about the first generation story at Namu that Angus Campbell told and recorded, which is that anytime you want to need anything, you just have to come and ask the chiefs. So what he meant by that was, it was recognized that people elsewhere on the coast would experience shortages from time to time. Salmon streams failed and whatever, but they knew there was always food nearby at Namu, and they just had to ask permission to come and harvest food. So if you see tool traditions showing up, some from the south and some with the cobbled stools and the microbraid from the north, it helps explain why you'd find that. It wasn't that it was a trade-free zone, everybody went there. It was with the permission of the chiefs. So that was very important. And then when Simon Fraser helped us by pulling together an exhibit on what archaeologists feel they found out about the history of our area. I think it was 1991. We got a grant from BC Heritage Trust, and Roy lined up a graduate student, Alex Mass, to design the exhibit that we put up in Bella Bella. And Phil Hobler came up with a subtitle. The main title was 10,000 Years at the Center. The subtitle was Bridging the Gap Between Native Awareness and Scientific Inquiry. And it was very exciting because as the archaeologists described the different periods, early, middle, and late, a creation story by, a story of creation, a first generation story told by late Willie Gladstone just fit into that. He said the first man woke up on the beach and looked around, there was nothing there, just stones. Fell asleep. Something woke him up again. He looked around and now there were trees, and it was just a perfect echo or illumination of the environmental changes that the archaeologists are describing. I remember when we had a little opening ceremony for our HEMAS in the school, it was set up in the school where the culture center is. I was all enthusiastic about how science validated our oral traditions. And Clarence spoke next, and he said, what was exciting about that story is that it had been passed down all those generations to the present day. So I will leave my presentation at that. I've probably gone over my 8 minutes. Thank you very much for the opportunity to kiakala our community, our council, our knowledge holders, and all of those who inspire us. Kaaxiha.
Thank you, Jenny. It's an honor to follow you. I'm going to pick up from here and talk a little bit more about the project and my perspective on the project. before we get a little bit of an intro to actually the website that we're talking about. But first, just a little bit on my perspective. I am an archaeologist, but I'm also an ethnobiologist or ethnoecologist. And I've been immersed in the ethnobiology community for as long as, well, when I started in my undergraduate years, I didn't know that my mentors were the kind of the main shakers and movers and the leading people in ethnobiology really in the world. It was just by my great good fortune. So it meant that for me, my view of archaeology has always been broad. It never was just about stone tools. And in fact, I'm crappy at stone tools. So it was never about stone tools at all, true confessions. But it was about a whole range of things that helped us appreciate and understand how Indigenous peoples lived with or by the land in the past, the present, and into the future. And it's really it's just a great time to be an archaeologist now, because I feel like that is really how archaeology is situating itself, where in the old days, it might have been kind of not cool to not do stone tools only. You know, now I feel like the breadth of perspective that comes with archaeology, or can come, or ethnoecology, or whatever you want to call it, is really being embraced. And of course, a central part of that is the teachings that have been gifted to us from our Indigenous collaborators and friends. So for me, being, you know, when Nancy and I and Jenny were starting, actually Jenny, it was 2011, I looked at our first emails together when we started talking about the possibility of this project. So it's quite a while ago that, you know, the three of us were sitting down imagining the kind of work we could do to talk about all the different kinds of ways that the Heiltsuk relate to, integrate with, tend, all the words you can imagine, the landscape, and how Huyat, as one special place on the Heiltsuk landscape, could represent that kind of multi-dimensional relationship that Cyril talked about and all the elders talked about. So in kind of Western scientific silos, we're talking about ethnoecology, archaeology, oral traditions, memories, language. All those things really were available for understanding, recording, integrating in this one very special place. But it became really obvious that writing scientific articles about them wasn't really going to cut it. And in fact, I have yet to write a scientific article really about this place specifically, because really we were looking for a way to kind of blend all these different kind of knowledges from Western and Indigenous perspectives in an accessible and respectful way. And Mark and I were already working together on a herring initiative, and I can't remember what else. Mark, we go way back as well. And Mark kind of pitched this to us. He said, you're doing this work, think about maybe doing it in a website. And it just seemed so right to us that this was a way where we could blend these different kind of knowledges in this fluid way that to me really reflected more fully Indigenous ways of knowing and being. Next slide. So I have to tell you though, when we started this and we first pitched it to the nation, Jenny and Nancy and Mark and I, we were really talking about a single page, like one big map with a couple dots on it. We had no idea back in 2013 when we first started talking about it that it would end up where it ended up. But the place is so rich and the collaborators so amazing that it just, well, the product was just developed organically. And we were seeking to, and I think hopefully succeeded in part in developing what Mark calls this living archive, a place where you could gather all this information in one place where it was accessible, and kind of above all where it could be presented in Heiltsuk voice. We were also really excited about the educational possibilities of this, both within the community, so sharing across generations, and definitely the Huyat project and the creation of the website has done that, but also education beyond the HealthSIC. There's surprisingly little educational material in the school systems in Indigenous voices, where people can tell their history from their point of view. And probably most of you know this, that it's required now in the BC curriculum to have Indigenous content in every class. But educators really don't know how to do that. And they want to be respectful, but they really don't know how. So this is another place where the website fits in. And then, of course, finally, the HealthSIC see this very much as part of their foundation for their rights and title, their local management of their own landscape, and really just asserting their history in their place of generations. So next slide. So the biggest thing was, with all this kind of information, is how to structure the website, because we had all these different kinds of knowledges. We had multiple community meetings where we asked people, what did you want to see in a website? And there was many of the themes that you'll see came out of, or really all of them came out of these meetings and the interviews with people. I highlighted here one of our favorite quotes that came from my friend Steve Carpenter. He's talking of Huyat. He said, "That's where we learn how to be HealthSIC." And really that became a theme, because Huyat is a place of learning and teaching, and that becomes clear over and over again in listening to the voices on the website. Next slide. We ended up doing about over 40 interviews with community members, and unbelievably rich stories of people's memories of this place, memories of stories they heard from their parents and grandparents, and also why this was important to them to be participating in this project. This resulted in, I don't know, a couple hundred pages of transcripts that I went through, and I didn't want to learn in Vivo or Daisy. So I did it all in Word, but came up with a bunch of themes that then we asked the community again if they made sense. And all these went into structuring the website that you see. Next slide. And just to show you the kinds of data, if you will, or knowledges that are written on the landscape itself. There's lots of rich archaeology, and of course we brought to that all the basic archaeological kind of techniques, ethnoecological surveys. We scour the ethnographic literature, we recorded oral traditions, and of course built on all the amazing work that Jenny and her team had done in the education center over the years. And again, our goal was to integrate this into the website, and we'll show you how we did this. It was really important to us that we not silo into these categories, though, but that we reflected again the way the health would want or did want to see their history represented. Just to show you before we dive into the website, that in the next slide you can see that it's not just about the website itself, but we tried to extend the reach of this project beyond the website. The website's gotten, I don't know, 200,000 hits or something like that, so it's really really been well received, which is really lovely. And Marka, can you go to the next slide? I don't know if you can, or there's just a delay. But I just want to show you a few things. Of course, there have been multiple community days. The school goes out to Huyat a lot. These are all the central photo is the kiddos at Huyat. The slide on the left is a large touch screen that was placed in the school so that kids at the school can actually learn about Huyat in the classroom before going out. So that's a central feature. The image at the bottom is a display that we did in the Bill Reed Gallery that's still at SFU, and it's still up there, that kind of talks about the exhibit and this place, and it's really a wonderful, wonderful space. And then finally, over at the right, you can see Teacher's Guide. My friend Nicole Smith, Pauline Waterfall, Elroy, and myself dove into the world of teaching, and we created an elaborate teacher guide for social studies and science for grade 9 curriculum. And we're going to be launching that in just a couple weeks. So we're really quite proud of that. And we know we have a long list of teachers who are anxiously waiting, because the website's a bit dense and people not really quite sure how to articulate all the pieces of the website to the BC curriculum. And so we've gone through the BC curriculum line by line and basically articulated it for them for these 2 classes, these 2 grades. Okay, turn it over to Mark, maybe. If Mark can start sharing a little bit, just showing you the website, just very briefly, because you can look at it at your own leisure.
Yeah, I'm just switching here to programs.
While Mark's doing that, one thing Mark can guide you through the basic features. So this is just the entrance page. And just if you can look up at the top, you can see, Mark, if you can show them the different tabs. There's and if you scroll over them, you get the the English word for them. So Gvila is living, Nuyim is stories, Kitsa. Where's the scroll over? It's not working. Oh, maybe it's delayed.
It is delayed, yeah.
Yeah, there you go. There's people. And again, really how these tabs came about, and even just the names of the tabs and helps required quite a bit of discussion. And if we can just go into Gvila, Mark, into living. Just to give you an example, and if you scroll down here, so this is a map basically showing all the different uses that are represented by oral traditions and the like. But you can see that if you go into settlements, for instance, and scroll down to the bottom tabs, you can see that we really tried to be integrative into the various kinds of knowledges that went into talking about settlements. So we have oral histories, we have, archaeological information, we have memories, we have just a whole range of things that kind of integrated the different kinds of knowledges that go into talking about the ancient settlements or smokehouse days, the more recent settlements. So Mark, why don't you just maybe give a tour more of the site, and I'll just sit back for a bit and then we'll turn it over to Elroy.
Sounds good. Hello, everyone. Mark Wunsch, Green Coast Media is our company. I've grown up as a naturalist photographer and have always been interested in visual communication. And then as a young man, or not even a young man, as a teenager even, I was getting interested in reading books about Indigenous culture, about Canada, and I was always drawn to this place. And long story short, made it happen many years later to move here eventually in 2009. And I was seeking for contact, to work with First Nations and institutions that, like the universities that are working with First Nations and archaeology and so forth. And so I got in touch with Dana through the Hakai initiative up in the Helsik territory in 2010, and that's kicked it all off. And Dana mentioned a few of our collaborative projects already. And for me, it's always interesting to innovate, to develop some new angle using technology in a way that it solves our problems or our desires, if you want. And that, in this case, was to communicate such a deep history, deep stories in a way that they are easy to navigate by normal people, and especially by the health sick and also the health sick young people, so that they have these resources, the stories of their grandparents, ancestors at hand, to be more connected and to make it easier for them to connect and make it, as Dana said, a living archive, as I call it, because we can, of course, update anytime and expand. And that's what I'm most interested in, is to develop this further. And so we're also working on an app and exhibition projects in other regions to do that. So yeah, I mean, you probably have most of the ones that I've seen present are probably familiar with the website, but I will, yeah, just give you a quick tour here. We're on the homepage, displayed here as a big house symbol, and yeah, under living we have all the daily life kind of aspects of the health sick living in Huyat gathered. It's always tricky with the depth of knowledge, how to arrange it. And on a website, you have a bit more opportunity. In exhibitions, we always try to keep the navigation as shallow as possible. For a website, you can go a bit deeper because you have people usually have more time and more, they're not on the go, or it's their choice. So they can come back and dig deeper if they want to. So that's why we, yeah, develop the structure with those tiles to go deeper. Same with the Niyum, the stories, and the video part has always been important to me, and that's why I personally spend a lot of trips and days in the field and with the people to do the interviews, from elders to scientists, to make the stories as rich as possible, and also get the footage that is adequate and the imagery to be able to tell these stories. And by interspersing that with quotes and yeah, summaries of the essential topics, we wanted to make it as lively as possible. Same applies here to the learning page, and then the people page. Dana, do you want to talk to this one? Because that's your baby in a way, the idea for it. We made the technical realization.
Sure. I don't, folks can hear me okay, I hope. This is actually Dana and Elroy's page, and Jennifer's. They just guided me, well, the whole community guided me. So here I am, as I said, an archaeologist who believes in breadth, but doing genealogies was definitely beyond my my skill set. But I had this idea that it'd be neat to do, or Mark and I did, to do pictures on the wall, and then to do this kind of little pyramid, if you can see on the side, that starts with Magaga. And Magaga is someone I would love to write a book about. She is one of several matriarchs I've come across on the coast who, at a time when First Nations communities were really, really struggling, population was low, these women upheld cultural connections, took care of many, many kiddos, were out on the land, and were really knowledge reservoirs. And so Magaga today, I believe, has 200 and some odd descendants, and there's yearly a Magaga reunion, or often a Magaga reunion. She is well loved for her teachings. And so I asked Mark, couldn't you just do a little widget or something to do a little, the little hierarchy or genealogy here, starting with Magaga and Magaga's husband. And he explained to me that things like that were actually hard to program. But since I don't know anything about programming, the way Mark and I work is I come up with an idea and then he makes it happen. And it's magic, actually. So this is one of Mark's brilliance here, is you click the little genealogy on the right-hand side, and then it takes you to the family stories. And Elroy, just huge hands up to Elroy here. He guided me every step of the way, every word, because I was constantly messing up whose family name had what. So really, this page is really Elroy and Jennifer's.
Okay.
And
so
then this is it.
Yeah.
Go on, Mark.
Yeah. Oh, you go ahead.
Well, then this page was people who were at the time living, and unfortunately, many of those people are no longer with us. But we basically wanted to have little snippets of people's voices for everybody who contributed to the project, and that's what these are. And I don't know, you can play one of them, Mark, because they're just all amazing. And these really, for each of these people, remember, there are pages and pages and pages of interviews.
I'm guessing, but I was probably about 12, 13, and 14 when we had first come out with our grandmother, great-grandmother and great-grandmother. And that was Marga and Bessie Brown. And the reason I'm saying that is because the people that during that time were all moving to various towns. Okay.
So I don't know if you could you hear that even? Everyone?
It's a bit garbled for me.
So anyhow, that's why I don't want to play this any further, but I just wanted to say, I mean, this was the idea to really make those interviews accessible to, I mean, it's not all the interviews, it's just selective pieces, but really to create that memory and for family members to be able to go back and listen to them. And then I'll just go to the tour. That was my idea, to have that connection to, it's about, I think, the best way really to put these facts and figures and voices back on the land. I mean, that was really the intention of the site here, was to put the voices back on the land, and through the virtual tour, it's a very powerful tool to do that. And you probably have explored it, and you can zoom around and go back and forth to explore the places, the stories, the scientific stories, but also the place names are there. Do I have one here? Not on this one. Let's go here. So, and then explore all the stories about the resources that are very important, the plants that were harvested, the ancient settlement sites that are thousands of years old, year 1500 years by, as we found by carbon dating. And the oldest village site, central Huyat, as we call it, downtown Huyat, is this 6,000-year-old site that is very strategically, very well located between at the confluence of the two rivers that come to into the estuary here into the bay. And then we'll just go back here. The timeline, just because we felt, okay, well, there's the oldest evidence of humans here in the area is 14,000 years old. So I believe it's the oldest record in BC. But then giving people the opportunity to study a little bit of the history and do that in a fun way. And then we have the About section, where we have all the facts and background stories that are kind of nice or good to understand, good to have. And that is, you find all that on the About. So yeah, I think that's it for the tour. Oh yeah, maybe a little feature here that we try to include as much as possible. the Halsey language and the words bring them to life here as well. So for people to who are learning the language, so that they also can do that here to a little degree. Okay.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
Maybe we can turn it over to you, Elroy.
Is there more on the presentation? Or
Hello?
Dana? No.
Hello?
Over to you, Elroy.
It's not going through. Hello?
Have we lost Elroy?
Hello?
Yeah.
Hello?
Elroy, can you hear us?
Hello?
There you are.
Hear me now? Dana?
Got you, Elroy.
All right, thank you. I hope you all can hear me. Sorry I'm late. I was out in the field and just got into the big house. Sorry to you from the big house. I don't have any slides though. Can you hear me, Andrew?
Yes, we can, Elroy. Nice and clear.
Because I'm using my iPad. See me now?
Yep, we can see you too.
Files. Here you go. I actually wanted to do the presentation from inside the big house, but there's something else going on there. And the reason for that is one of our house posts, Chumklux, is on there on the bottom for the Oyuli. And I just wanted to show the relevance and the cultural context of our history. That these Nuyums are very important to us. How they are part of our genealogy. So they're not just stories that are told just for pure entertainment. They are our history. And to complement that with archaeology of getting dates and finding out what layers are here and there and where sites are located, that all complements our ancient history. And so, so firstly, I guess my name is Geche Tesu. It comes from Nulu, from the Oyuli tribe. And I also share a name with my father, Eddie White Sr., Yemajalas. And Yemajalas came from Tiasu, and that's where Tumklux landed. So if you scroll through the website, you'll be able to go on a tour and find out where Tiasu is. So it kind of puts you into a place and gives you an idea where our ancestors landed and made their journeys. And I'd like to thank Dana and Mark and the rest, Jennifer, for asking me to be part of the project. Not sure if they informed you, but I came in late on the project. And my Dana at that time was looking at connecting the families together. And so before I became an archaeologist, I'm a Palach historian, and I happen to know a lot of people about family members. And in fact, I come from Makata as well, and that is on my mother's side. And I'm also from Wigashpa and Chumklux. I'm related to them as well through my ancestral names on the White Martin side. And many of those people that are in the the family group photo, a lot of us, we're all related to them. We're such a tiny little community now, even though we're growing. But we all know we all come from the Huyat people. And so it was really enriching to utilize the skill of my potlatch knowledge to help this Dana and Mark put this website together. And I was really amazed to see how technology today can bring people to a site without them even going to a site and almost in real time. And today's technology is embraced and taken over by our youth. My grandchildren use it. So I'm just amazed by when they're using technology today, that I would never ever think that you could do that. So I really don't have much else to say except that I work in the archaeology field. I have a link to the Hermd office, and I just came from a site that's also known as the Smokehouse Days, just like Huyat. And unfortunately, we just started the work, and we're hoping to be able to get some dates and so on, and some information for our people about another part of our Smokehouse Days. And when I joined this project, I shared with Dana about my Huyat information, the interviews that I conducted, and how whenever I interview people, or I'll join somebody, an academic who will interview people, I find it really interesting when they ask the questions and then the people answer me as if I asked the question. And that's just sort of our multi-generation approach, how we're all related. And then I honestly had to kind of redirect the people who have been interviewed back to the person asking the question, so that we're all in the same context and content. Aside from that, I'm sorry I don't have that much else to share, but I'm really impressed with how Dana and the group reached out to the Heltsa community and to provide the living voices to the outside world. Wait.
Thank you, Elroy. Andrew, maybe we should open up for discussion now at this point.